Welcome to Paranormal Possibilities, where we talk about what is possible, what is probable, and what is unlikely. You've decided to camp in a forest. As the sun sinks below the horizon, you pitch your tent near a set of abandoned train tracks. The wind howls through the trees as the first stars emerge in the darkening sky. Setting up for the night, you hear the distant call of a train whistle, muted, distorted, far away. It grows stronger, closer. You glance towards the tracks, knowing they're old and rusted and capable of bearing the weight of a locomotive. Yet the sound continues to approach. Curiosity turns to unease. Unease turns to concern. The rails begin to tremble. You can hear the bell now. Then you see it. First the light blazing through the darkness like a pale, unblinking eye. Then the shape. A spectral locomotive emerges from the forest, surrounded by an ethereal glow that distorts the night air around it. The thought of grabbing your cell phone to record what you're seeing doesn't even cross your mind. Now your hands are shaking too much to film anyway. The doomed train rolls past, dragging its tender and passenger cars along a track that leads to nowhere. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it is gone. Silence returns to the forest. The stars seem brighter somehow, and as you sit alone in the darkness, you begin to wonder whether you saw anything at all. The rise of the locomotive and the train tracks that connected civilizations near and far began in the early 19th century. Across Europe and later North America, steam locomotives became a common sight and the primary way to haul freight and passengers to and fro. As the iron horse, as it was called, proliferated around the world, so too did stories of tragedy and haunted memory. Railroads were a dangerous new technology, and derailments, collisions, boiler explosions, and worker fatalities became part and parcel during the age of rail. Being a train engineer, conductor, a fireman who shoveled coal, a porter, or even a passenger could be risky in those early days. And like the age of sail that preceded it, railroads accumulated not only history, but folklore and legend. And soon the stories of haunted trains and spectral locomotives soon began to rise in the hearts and minds of the populace. There are two primary categories of ghost trains. The first is the spectral locomotive, which is an ethereal train with no substance riding along the tracks, usually in a repeated haunting that is either based on a tragic event or a calendar date or time of year. This is the most common type of ghost train, and there are many examples considering the brief history of railroads. The most notable being Abraham Lincoln's funeral train, the St. Louis Light, and more recently the Silver Pilon. After Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in Ford's Theater, a funeral train carrying his body left Washington, D.C. in April of 1865, bound for his home state of Illinois. This train carried the president's body along a route that gave Americans a chance to mourn the great emancipator. It is said that each year on the anniversary of that trip, Lincoln's funeral train continues its journey state by state, stopping clocks and timepieces as it goes by. The St. Louis Light is a ghost train seen in Saskatchewan, Canada. The train's light is seen for miles along the abandoned rail line. There have been attempts to debunk this phenomenon, including a claim that it was caused by light diffraction from vehicle lights, but the St. Louis Light has been seen prior to the widespread use of automobiles. The Silver Arrow or Silver Pilon was a Stockholm Metro ghost train that is said to travel to the Kimlinga ghost station. Passengers who boarded her cars were unable to get off, never to be seen alive again. These kinds of stories have been prevalent since the rise of the first steam locomotives, and ghost trains have become so common in railroad folklore that they even appeared in fiction. An 1896 newspaper story describes a railroad worker boarding a mysterious Pullman car that turned out to be the ghost of a train wrecked a year earlier. Whether readers believe the story was true or not, its publication demonstrates that ghost trains were already firmly embedded in the public imagination. The second kind of ghost train is the haunted train, one that has had a nefarious or infamous past filled with fatality and misfortune. While researching railroad hauntings, I discovered a much lesser-known case that may be the strangest of them all, of a locomotive with a reputation so dark that railroad workers reportedly refused to operate it. In Nova Scotia in 1904, the Intercolonial Railway Company operated a locomotive known as Number 239, starting off as a passenger hauler, until tragedy struck. A newspaper article described the strange history of Intercolonial Railway locomotive number 239. According to the article, number 239 had become known as a hoodoo engine. Today we might say it was cursed or haunted or simply unlucky. Whatever the explanation, railroad workers believed something was wrong with the locomotive. The engine had been involved in multiple serious accidents. Several passengers and crew members had died in wrecks associated with the locomotive. Even more unsettling, the newspaper reported that 3 engineers and 2 firemen who had worked aboard number 239 had lost their lives during its service. As the years passed, the locomotive's reputation grew darker. Railway employees reportedly became reluctant to work on the engine, and some wanted it removed from service altogether. Then came the ghost story. According to workers at the Moncton machine shops, a railway employee entered the engine shed one evening to tend to the locomotive. In the dim light, he noticed a man standing in the cab of number 239. The figure appeared to be perfectly ordinary, one hand raised on the throttle as though he were preparing to take the locomotive out. Assuming the man was a machinist performing repairs, the worker spoke to him and continued with his task. There was no reply. A few moments later, he looked back toward the cab, and the man was gone. Not walking away, not climbing down. Gone. When the worker later checked with the shop, he discovered that no machinists or other employees had been on the locomotive that night. The sighting quickly spread among railway workers who were already convinced that number 239 was cursed. Was the figure one of the engineers who had died while operating the locomotive? Was it merely a trick of light and shadow in a dimly lit engine shed? Or had years of tragedy created a legend so powerful that workers began seeing exactly what they expected to see? Whatever the answer, the story of 239 raises an interesting question. Can an object become haunted? Not just a house, not just a graveyard, an object, a locomotive built of steel, steam, and machinery. When enough tragedy becomes attached to a place or thing, do people begin to sense something lingering there? Or do our minds naturally create stories to help us make sense of repeated loss? More than a century later, those questions remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. In 1904, there were railway workers in Nova Scotia who wanted nothing to do with locomotive number 239. Now, we don't know what became of number 239, other than it moved from its passenger line to the freight line, perhaps to limit the danger or fear it inspired. When or if she was decommissioned early is not in the article, so we're just left to guess. The primary paranormal explanation for a ghost train is a residual haunting. A residual haunting is the theory that traumatic events leave an imprint on a location or object. These imprints can create repetitive, non-interactive sightings and experiences. Think of it like a recording rather than a conscious ghost or spirit. Railroad hauntings in particular fit this pattern because phantom trains tend to follow the same routes they have. Repeating lights, repeating sounds, objects associated with the repeated tragedies. It all makes sense. There are many skeptical explanations for spectral locomotives and haunted trains, though. Things like atmospheric anomaly, light refraction, misidentification, even confirmation bias based on popular legend. Whether ghost trains are actual residual hauntings, whether number 239 was indeed a hoodoo engine, and whether or not the Silver Pelin is a train that once you get on, you can never get off, is not something that can be proven. But it does reflect the romantic grandeur of the steam locomotive, with its imposing dark shape, single pale eye, breathy exhaust, and almost lifelike organic motion as it cuts through the dark forested landscape on a narrow shining track, vanishing nearly as quickly as it arrived. To this day, the call of a distant train whistle, especially at night, seems to awaken the spirits. So the next time you're camping in the woods and come across an abandoned set of train tracks, be sure to set your tent up far enough away not to be swept up by the commotion. Let me know in the comments if you know of any ghost train legends from your neck of the woods, and if you like the content, please like and subscribe. It helps me continue to produce videos for you. And remember, when it comes to the paranormal world, the possibilities are endless.